Hey there, welcome to today's video. What are we talking about? Um, Healing books. I won't say a lot, but I get people sometimes they say that they want to be able to write a healing book. However, um, they're not always in a place to be able to write it. So let me explain. We live in a time where healing is often treated as content. So if you survive something, there's an unspoken expectation to be able to share it, particularly with younger people. Absolutely no sense of delineation between what's private and what's personal. And so they want to be able to post everything, publish everything, and somehow turn it into proof, i.e., receipts. But not every healing story needs to be published for public consumption. And so today I want to be able to talk about why discernment and not necessarily exposure is one of the most important skills a writer can develop. So we understand that writing can be a powerful healing tool, but the healing and the publishing are not the same thing. They don't happen in the same instance. And I think that's what people get wrong. Um, Healing, when you're doing healing writing, okay, let me go back and explain. One of the things that I teach is what I like to call meditative writing, where we sit down. You can do it with yourself, with a group of people. There's a journaling prompt, and we there's a journaling prompt, and it's not, at least when I do it, the journaling prompts are usually meant to probe into who you are and who you are becoming. I don't necessarily like to go into details of things that have happened to you. Rather, I want to be able to gently push people into thinking about how that thing that happened to you may have shaped you for better or for worse. So when we do healing writing, it's generally meant to be able to serve the writer. Okay? When you're doing that sort of healing writing, that is generally meant to be able to serve the writer and the writer only. When you are writing a book, it's good to distinguish or to be able to understand that when you're writing a book, that is for a particular reader, not necessarily for you. Although there may be some healing parts of actually getting up and publishing the book to see how far you've come from where you were, from the event that actually happened to you. But the healing writing, the meditative writing that I was just talking about, that sort of writing is meant for the writer. And then when you actually sit down and author the book, that is for a reader, an audience, your client, so on and so forth. One of those integrates your experience, and the other helps you to shape meaning. So the healing writing, the meditative writing, that's the one that integrates your experience. You're talking about what happened, who it happened to, and then we start to, again, at least the way that I do it, in meditative writing, we are starting to get you to start to think about how it is that event affected you and what does that mean for you going forward. And sometimes that can be a rather long process. You don't sit down and write you don't sit down and just write one journaling prompt and think that you've got it all figured out. Sometimes it may take you some weeks, months, sometimes even years. Sometimes it might take a trip to your favorite therapist. Sometimes it might take you having conversations with certain people in order for you to be able to process and make meaning out of it. But it's important to know the difference between what you're doing is meditative writing and what it is that you're doing for a particular audience. So many writers feel pressure to publish their hardest experience. And this is often because I think our social media and our TV shows and um, a lot of online spaces ask for these stories. And the reason why I even bring this up is because as a writer myself, I actually do this for a living myself. I don't just, I actually don't have a degree in writing or the English language. This is all stuff that I've learned on my own. And so I do write for magazines and other publications. And one of the things that I love to write is personal essays. But when I look at some of these spaces that ask for particular types of personal essays, it's like, gosh, the more, for some of them, it's like the more raunchy, the more violent, the more, surprising, the more that they want. The more that they want the story. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have a whole bunch of, people always ask me for dating stories. Like, I don't have any dating stories to be able to share with anyone. You got to ask another traveler because I don't have it. They want, good details of, what are the men like in Turkey? Girl, I don't know. Got no idea. But what I'm saying is that when a lot of these spaces, they ask for these stories from writers where they want to, it's like they encourage you to give you, the most horrible story. Like, for example, there was one place that I want to be able to write a personal story, a personal essay for. And they asked, it was involving my mom. And it was just, a story of when she was alive. And then, my mom passed away back in 2006. And they're like, well, we need to see, like, do you have pictures of her while she was in hospice? She had cancer when she died of cancer. And so, like, the editor had asked me for pictures of her in hospice. I'm like, dude, fuck off. I don't have any pictures of my mom in hospice, and if I did, I damn sure wouldn't give it to you. So, and so I just sort of skipped. I was like, I couldn't do this in good. I couldn't give him anything in good faith or have any integrity. I just I couldn't, run off sharing pictures of my mom while she was in hospice. That is too personal. Even though she's been gone for 20 years, I wouldn't do that to her. But many writers, they feel the pressure to publish their hardest experience because pain gets attention. Pain gets attention, and what writers want is when they're writing things for other people, they want other eyeballs on their work. They want to get a reaction from people. And so, the more gross, the more attention it'll get. In a lot of spaces, they will reward you for your so-called vulnerability. Vulnerability is really popular right now. We see a lot of content, and who knows if these things are staged or not, where people are, having a breakdown and they're crying in the middle of the workplace, or they're at home and they're sliding down the wall, snotting and crying all over the place. And, it's like, well, and, supposedly they were home alone, so they had to set up a camera in order to capture this sliding down the wall moment. So that sort of vulnerability and giving of details of people's divorce stories. That's what's extra popular right now with so-called Christy and Desmond. If you are on Instagram or TikTok, you'll see that all over your feed between them and then all the other stuff that happens afterwards with folks trying to be able to get a divorce in peace. It's kind of ridiculous. And so people's experience of their trauma is often mistaken for depth. So they're traumatic, their trauma as they're experiencing it. No one's had any time to really sit down and process anything. But everybody has a think piece on what it is that they're looking at. So the trauma is mistaken for depth. And so this creates a distorted incentive where writers start sharing their stories before they finish living with them. And that's what's part of what's important about Christy and Desmond. I hope I'm getting their names right, child. They start sharing their stories, even though they're not writers. You can apply this to writers. Writers start sharing their story before they finish living with them. And it takes some time. Like, I really thought that I wanted to write in my memoir the year I actually had something to be able to say. But as I move further and further away from the events of my own personal healing journey, it changes with every year as I change, as I get a little bit older. And you learn a bunch of stuff. There was a bunch of details that happened during my healing journey, but what those events mean changes, and I get to be able to integrate what it is I've learned, and I apply what it is that I've learned to other spaces in my life as I mature and grow older. And that makes for a better book, to be honest. If I had written that memoir like a year after I left Thailand, it would have been like 60 pages, child. It really wouldn't even be that long. Just because you need more than just the details of what happened. You need to be able to know how it has affected you as you move on in life. So when stories are published too early, when healing stories are published too early, one of three things happen. The writer stays emotionally entangled with the story. And so this is what happens when you see people, they might talk about events and they're like, oh, I'm done with this person, or I'm over this event. But they can't tell the story without crying all the time. Or they start yelling, they get real hot. It's a real touchy subject. So if you stay emotionally entangled with the story, you're not really to write the book that you want to be able to write. The story often lacks perspective. You're only focused on what happened to you, but not other perspectives on how it is that you got to that place in the first place. Or how it has, or how your reaction to that particular event has affected you moving forward. You may not be aware of what that even means yet. So the reader is asked to carry weight the writer hasn't even finished processing. It's just a bunch of, it's like, wow, we get left with a lot of details of the stories of your personal life, but you haven't really walked us through the journey of what that means to you, and that matters. you don't want to traumatize your audience. You don't want to traumatize your audience. So it's not catharsis as it is really more displacement. And publishing doesn't complete healing, but distance from the event does. The further away you get from the event that you are writing about, hopefully the more you would be able to have to say about it. So this is what mature authorship actually looks like. Mature authorship comes from integration. That means that there has been some time that has passed between you, the event, and how it is that you've moved on with that event. You've developed some sort of meaning about what it is that event means to you. Not other people's opinions and get mad about other people's opinions, but to really understand what it is that this event means to me and how is it that it has affected me moving forward, hopefully for the better. The writer is no longer centered in the wound. Like I was explaining before, sometimes when people are hurting and you ask them a question about that particular hurt, you can often tell that there's a sore spot there because, they immediately get defensive. They might start crying, they get angry, and just all around pissed off. And so when a person is able to sort of remove themselves from the victim story, when they can remove themselves from the victim story, that is often an indicator that they are ready to be able to move forward with telling a story that is worthy of a book. And lastly, the story has something to offer beyond survival. Oh, God. Ooh, so this is one of my pet peeves in reading some of the nonfiction, self-published nonfiction books. And I know everyone doesn't have the budget or the resources to be able to pay for an editor or certain types of editors. And I should do a video on that, different types of editors, because there's more to editing than just, grammar and spelling. The type of editing that I actually do is called developmental editing. And so before we even get to the grammar and the spelling, we need to settle on what the story is that you are telling. And this is all part of it. So your story has to have something to offer beyond just, I survived breast cancer. We're glad that you did. And that's a powerful thing to be stated. But what did you learn in the process of learning how to survive? How did you get past the part of saying that I survived and you've been able to integrate this experience of cancer as an example? How are you able to integrate that experience into who you have become and who it is that you've moved on to become? Especially if you were fearful of whether or not you were actually going to survive the cancer event. People go through times where they are alone, and it's just you and God in conversation about whether or not you are actually going to make it. And then you do make it. So what does that mean? What does that mean now to you, now that you survived the event? What does your life look like after the survival so that you can get to the thriving at some point? And so the most powerful stories are not told from inside the pain. They're actually told from a place that came after. I will say that again. The most powerful stories are not told from inside the pain. They're told from the place that came after. So distance from your story is not avoidance, it's actually clarity. The more time and space that you have between the event and where you are months or years down the line, hopefully you've developed some sort of clarity. So when you're writing your healing story, you want to be able to understand that as an independent writer, you get to decide what it is that you want to share and when. So, you're not publishing for, for personal validation. You're not monetize healing that you haven't actually dealt with. Because my God, today, so many, I don't even know if I should even bother to say it, but I see this in a lot of coaches online, a lot of unhealed coaches who want to be able to monetize stories that they have not healed from. And so they're bleeding all over their customers. But I'm going to move on. And as an independent writer, you get to choose sovereignty over visibility. So it's not that publishing a story can be a sign of wisdom. Not publishing a story can be a sign of wisdom and not necessarily fear. It's okay to be able to say that you're not ready to tell this story. It's okay for you to be able to say that you are you're still in a process. Now you can write. This is actually when it's a good time for you to be able to journal your process, because you know that there's going to be a big epiphany at some point in this. That's the part that you actually sit down and journal about. That's the part that you journal about. That's what you keep your notes about. However you want to do it, whether you want to, do a video journal or a written journal, doesn't really matter. But it's okay for you to be silent for a while about your story. Okay? So that's what I have today. If you want to see how writers actually translate their lived experience into work that is clear, grounded, and publishable, I'm actually sharing 5 successful magazine pitches, including the exact pitch that I sent to editors, followed by a link of the actual published article. And now, if you want to be able to write for magazines, if you really want to be able to tell stories that are based on your life or questions that you have, because that's what I do. I write, the stories that I write are based either on my own personal experience, or I find other people who have other experiences based on the questions that I have come up in my own life. And I love doing that. I swear to God, I love it so much. It's so much fun. And so if you would like to be able to do that, I suggest that you go to the description box and click the link in the description box. When you click on it, you'll see 5 successful magazine pitches. Put in your name and your email address, and you will get the file. You'll get the file in your email box. So you don't owe the world your wounds. You owe your work integrity. Integrity. God, that's such a big word. I want to do a whole series of videos on personal integrity, because that's important to you as a writer. Personal integrity. So click like, share this video with another writer. Subscribe to the channel if you would like to be able to get more Um, if you would like to be able to get more videos like this, I would love to have you as part of the community. So yeah, I will see you in the next video. Peace.